Welcome back to Campfire Horror Tales. Tonight we're heading deep into the wilderness, where the trees whisper, the air grows cold, and the trail ahead might not lead you home. 6 true hiking horror stories. From hidden trails and missing hikers, to the watchers that linger where maps end. So grab your flashlight, keep close to the fire, and remember, never step off the trail. I've hiked most of the trails in northern Vermont. I know the ridge lines, the rivers, and where the map markers fade from red to dirt. Hiking was how I cleared my head after the divorce. I like the silence, the kind that fills your ears until you almost forget there's a world beyond the trees. That morning, the air smelled like wet pine and smoke from distant cabins. I'd planned to take the Copper Ridge Trail, but a few miles in, I saw something strange. A narrow path veering off into the woods. It wasn't on my map. No markers, no signposts. Just a thin track of trampled leaves leading deeper into the forest. It shouldn't have been there. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed it. At first, it felt like any other old logging route. Roots twisting across the dirt, ferns brushing my legs, the occasional squirrel darting out. But the deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, not even the distant hum of the highway. Just silence. The trail began to slope downward, and the sunlight dimmed. The trees here grew so close together that they bent toward one another, their branches locking above like ribs. I remember thinking it looked like walking through the inside of something alive. After maybe an hour, I found what looked like a small clearing. There was a fire ring, old but neat. A few stones still blackened. A tent lay collapsed nearby, rotted through from years of rain. Someone had camped here long ago. I poked around, half expecting to find a name carved into a log, but only found a small piece of cloth and something else. A tiny bell, tied to a string. When I lifted it, it gave a faint jingle, so soft it barely made a sound. Tied to it was a note, written in faded pencil. "Don't follow the bells." I laughed at first. It felt like a prank, some backwoods joke for tourists. But the longer I stared at it, the colder I felt. That night, I set up my tent near the clearing. The sky was cloudless, but no stars were visible, just a pale glow, as if the forest itself was reflecting the light back down. I didn't even bother lighting a fire. I was too tired, and the silence was heavy enough to press against my skin. Around midnight, I heard it. A faint ringing. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Maybe the bell I'd found was moving in the wind. But there was no wind. The sound came again. Distant, deliberate, like someone walking slowly through the woods. Each step followed by a soft chime. It circled the campsite. I held my breath, every muscle locked. I told myself it could be an animal. Maybe deer had brushed against a hanging trinket. But the pattern was too steady, too human. Then came the whisper. Just one word. Drawn out, low, from behind my tent. It sounded like my name. I wanted to believe I was dreaming. But when I sat up, I could still hear it. Closer now. Jingle. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent. The beam cut through the fog, but there was nothing there. Only trees, shadows, and the faint glint of metal somewhere off the trail. I didn't sleep. I sat there until morning, shaking, waiting for the first light. When the sun rose, everything looked normal again. Almost too normal. The forest was loud now, birds chirping, branches cracking, the wind rushing like nothing had happened. I packed up quickly and tried to retrace my steps. The map showed no sign of this path, but I knew the direction I'd come from. Or I thought I did. Except every turn led me back to the same clearing, the same dead campfire, the same bell. The forest felt wrong now. It looked shifted, like the landscape itself had been rearranged. I tried walking in a straight line, compass out, eyes forward. An hour later, the clearing appeared again, waiting for me like it had been expecting it. That was when I noticed the new footprints. They circled my tent, barefoot, larger than mine. The prints stopped exactly where I had stood the night before, flashlight in hand. Panic kicked in hard. I ran. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just ran toward the rising sun, crashing through ferns and branches until I found a familiar signpost. Copper Ridge. 3 miles. I nearly cried when I saw it. I drove home that day and tried to forget about it. But when I unpacked my bag, I froze. The bell was back inside my jacket pocket. Only now it was clean, polished. And when I tilted it, it didn't make a sound. Just a faint whisper, "You found the trail." My brother Jason loved hiking more than anyone I've ever known. He said the forest made him feel small in the best possible way, like the world didn't owe him anything, and that was freedom. 3 years ago, he went missing on the Ridgeway Loop Trail in upstate New York. The rangers searched for a week before they found his backpack wedged between 2 rocks. His boots were nearby, perfectly placed side by side. No signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing. Just his things. And silence. I was 17 then, old enough to understand what missing really meant, but young enough to believe I could fix it. Every fall, when the leaves turn the same orange as the ones from that week, I go back. Not to find him, I gave up on that, but to feel close to him again. This year, I brought his old compass. It still points north, but the casing is scratched, and there's something strange about the needle. It it shakes whenever I get too far from the main trail. That morning was quiet, colder than usual. Mist hung low over the ground, and every step made the sound of soaked leaves. I'd memorized the trail by now, the switchbacks, the fallen tree, the stream that cuts across at mile 4. But when I reached that stream, something felt off. The water was perfectly still. No current, no ripples, like it had been frozen in time. And right on the opposite bank, I saw a footprint, barefoot, deep in the mud. For a moment, I thought it was mine, from some earlier visit. But the direction was wrong. It was facing toward me. I crossed the stream anyway. It's stupid, I know. But after 3 years of questions, fear turns into a kind of obsession. You start needing answers more than you need safety. The forest on the other side felt older somehow. The trees looked darker, thicker, almost black beneath the canopy. There were no trail markers, no sounds of birds. Only that same low hum the forest gets when it's about to rain. Except it never did. After another half hour, I saw it. A torn piece of blue fabric hanging from a branch. My brother's jacket was blue, the same color. I ran to it, and when I reached up, the fabric tore free easily, too easily, like it had just been caught there recently. And that's when I heard it. Sarah. It was his voice, Jason's voice. I swear it was him. The sound came from somewhere deeper in the woods, soft and broken, like he was calling through a fog. Jason, I shouted back, my throat dry. Where are you? Silence. Then the voice again. Closer this time, but wrong. Off. Like a recording that had been slowed down just a little too much. Sarah. I don't know what made me move, but I started walking toward it, following the sound through the trees. The compass in my hand began to shake violently. The needle spun in circles until it stopped, pointing behind me. North was no longer north. Jason. No answer. I turned to head back, but the trail was gone. Completely. No stream, no markers, no direction. Just endless forest in every direction. That's when panic set in. I ran until my legs burned. The voice followed, echoing between the trees. Sometimes it sounded far away, sometimes right behind me. Every time I stopped, the forest went dead silent. And then, out of nowhere, I saw a shape standing between 2 trees. Tall. Still. I couldn't see its face, only that it was barefoot, and the mud around its feet looked wet. I whispered my brother's name one last time. But the thing didn't move. Instead, the wind began to blow for the first time that day, and I heard the faint sound of bells. That's when I ran. I don't remember how I found my way back, but somehow I stumbled out near the parking lot. My legs were cut, my clothes torn. The ranger who found me said I'd been gone almost 6 hours, though I swear it couldn't have been more than 1. Before I left, I checked the compass one more time. The needle had stopped spinning, but it wasn't pointing north anymore. It was pointing straight into the woods. Last night, I heard the voice again. This time, outside my window. It whispered, "Come finish the trail." I worked as a forest ranger in Oregon for 15 years. It's not a job people keep that long. Most quit after their first winter. Too much isolation, too many sounds that don't belong to anything you can name. I started at 24, fresh out of a bad breakup, looking for peace and quiet. I thought I'd found it among the endless pines and the steady rhythm of the wind. But the forest changes when you stay in it long enough. It learns you. It remembers. The station I worked at sat near the edge of Ridge Hollow National Park. Population: me, 2 other rangers on rotation, and miles of trails that only the desperate or the lost would hike past October. At night, the woods became impossibly still. The first few years, I loved that silence. I'd stand outside my cabin with a cup of coffee and listen to nothing at all. But around year 10, the silence stopped being peaceful. It started feeling like the forest was waiting for something. We'd lose hikers every season. It happens. People get careless. Storms roll in. Batteries die. Someone panics and steps off the trail. But over the years, I began to notice something strange. The reports were always the same. No tracks leading away. No torn clothing. No signs of animals. Just gone. And then their belongings started showing up. The first time, it was a red jacket. Clean, folded neatly on my porch one morning. I thought one of the rookies was messing with me, but they swore it wasn't them. Then came a water bottle, a flashlight, a hiking boot, each item belonging to a different missing person. Always dry, always spotless. By the 5th one, I stopped reporting it. There are rules about these things. The official version says nature reclaims what's hers. But that doesn't explain why the compass needles near Ridge Hollow never point the same direction twice, or why the radio picks up voices whispering coordinates that don't exist. Last November, I found a note nailed to a tree near the old fire road. Just one line. Don't stay past dusk. That night, I broke that rule. The sunset came early, swallowed by fog. My flashlight beam was weak, but I could still see the outline of the trees, tall, straight, endless. I turned to head back, and that's when I heard the radio crackle. Unit 3, return to post, now. Except the voice wasn't from dispatch. It was my own. I froze. The transmission repeated, but quieter this time, like it was moving away. I followed it. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct, maybe the same thing that pulls moths toward light. The deeper I went, the stranger everything felt. The air was colder, heavy, and the trees looked wrong, too evenly spaced, too symmetrical. Then I saw a glow between the trunks. At first, I thought it was a campfire, but it wasn't orange. It was pale blue, flickering like lightning caught in a jar. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw the backpacks. Dozens of them, laid out in a perfect circle around the light. Some new, some old, all zipped shut. One of them had my name tag. I reached out to touch it, but before I did, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. Slow, steady crunching on leaves. I turned around. There was no one there, but I could still feel it watching me. Something standing just out of sight, behind the tree line. My flashlight began to dim. The air vibrated, humming low like a distant engine. And then, the voices started. Not through the radio this time, right behind me. Soft, overlapping whispers. They sounded like everyone I'd ever searched for. Ranger, come home. I ran. I don't remember how long. The forest looked different with every step, trees bending where they shouldn't, paths looping back on themselves. When I finally saw the red glow of my cabin window, I didn't stop until I slammed the door behind me. The next morning, I went to check the clearing. It wasn't there. Just trees, untouched, as if nothing had ever been burned or lit. But when I came back, there was a new backpack on my porch. A black one. Mine. Inside was my logbook, flipped open to a page I hadn't written yet. The date was a week in the future. The entry read, "Search called off. Ranger missing. Believed lost in Ridge Hollow." I left that night. Drove until the forest disappeared in the mirror. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the radio crackle. My own voice whispering from the static. Unit 3 returned to post. And I know, someday I will. When I worked at a little roadside diner just outside Redleaf Park, hikers were our main customers. You could always tell who was new by how clean their boots were. Locals came for pie and gossip. Outsiders came for the coffee and directions to the perfect fall trail. Everyone asked about Redleaf Trail. It was the main attraction, winding deep into the mountains and famous for its colors in October. But if you mentioned the last campsite, the one at mile 12, the regulars would fall silent. I didn't believe the stories at first. They all sounded like backwoods ghost tales meant to spook tourists. Until that one night when a man named Carter came in, shaking so badly he could barely hold his mug. He'd been hiking Redleaf solo for 3 days. Said he reached the last campsite just before dusk. It was supposed to be beautiful, a clearing surrounded by maples, the leaves glowing red even under cloud cover. But when he arrived, someone else had already set up camp. At least, That's what he thought. There was a tent near the tree line. Small, faded yellow, zipped shut. No footprints around it. No smoke from a fire. No sound. He called out, but no one answered. Figured maybe they'd gone for water, so he set up his own tent on the opposite side of the clearing. When the sun dipped below the ridge, the forest went dark in seconds. The air turned colder than it should have been for October. Around midnight, Carter woke up to the sound of whispering. Soft, like wind through leaves. But it wasn't wind. He swore it came from the other tent. At first, he thought it might be kids. Sometimes local teens hike out there for a thrill. But the whispers weren't playful. They were rhythmic, low, almost like chanting. He tried to ignore it, pulling his sleeping bag tighter until the voices stopped all at once. Silence. Then came the sound of a zipper. Slow, deliberate. Carter's flashlight flickered as he turned it on. Across the clearing, the yellow tent stood open. Nothing moved. He called out again, but his voice sounded too loud in the still air. Then something stepped out. He said it looked like a shadow. Thin, uneven, the shape of a person but stretched wrong. Like it didn't understand how to walk. He grabbed his pack and ran without looking back. Didn't stop until he reached the ranger station the next morning. The rangers went to check the site, but there was nothing there. No tents, no prints, just flattened grass and ashes from an old fire pit. That's what Carter told me before he left. He came back 2 days later, though. Walked in just before closing, looking worse than before. Clothes dirty, eyes hollow. He didn't say a word, just dropped something on the counter. It was a small tag from a tent zipper. Brand new. The metal was still cold. Then he walked out. No one ever saw him again. After that, I started paying more attention to what people said about Redleaf. One of the older rangers told me they'd stopped marking the last campsite on official maps years ago. Too many disappearances. Too many strange calls. He said it was bad luck to talk about it near the woods. The next few weeks, hikers still came through, though fewer than before. Most were tourists who'd heard rumors online and wanted to prove the stories were fake. One couple came in on a Friday morning, said they were camping at Redleaf for the weekend. I told them to stay away from the end of the trail. They laughed, said they didn't believe in ghost stories. By Monday, their car was still parked outside the ranger station. Search teams found their campsite on the 4th day. Their tent was gone, but they found 2 sleeping bags laid out side by side, and in the center of the clearing, a small yellow tag. When the rangers brought it back, I swear it was the same one Carter had left on my counter. That's when I stopped opening the diner early. I didn't want to see who came out of those woods anymore. It's been 5 years since then. Redleaf Park closed officially last spring. Maintenance, they said. Locals know better. Sometimes, late at night, I still see headlights pulling into the old lot. People with brand new gear, chasing fall colors and stories they don't believe. They always ask the same question. Hey, do you know if there's still a campsite at the end of the trail? I tell them no. There isn't. Not anymore. But when I drive home past the tree line, I sometimes see a faint yellow glow deep between the trunks, like the light inside a tent. And if you listen closely, when the wind dies down, you can still hear the whisper of a zipper opening. I've always loved hiking with my friends. Every fall we pick a new trail, somewhere remote, somewhere quiet. That year, we chose the Pine Brook Range, a stretch of forest in Pennsylvania that doesn't even show up on most tourist maps. We wanted to disconnect. There were 5 of us. Me, my girlfriend Lena, her brother Kyle, and our friends Marcus and Ben. The first day was perfect. Cool air, golden leaves, that peaceful crunch under your boots. But on the second day, everything changed. It started when Marcus decided to take a shortcut. He said he'd found an old trail on his GPS that looped us back faster. It's just a mile off the main path, he said, smiling like it was nothing. I didn't want to go. Something about the woods felt heavier there, like the air was thicker, the silence heavier. Even the trees looked wrong. They were closer together, their trunks too pale, almost gray. But nobody wanted to turn back. About 15 minutes in, we lost the trail markers completely. My compass needle jittered like it was confused, and the GPS froze. That's when Lena said, "Do you guys hear that?" At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere behind us. We stopped. The sound stopped. Kyle called out, "Hello?" But only the echo answered. We laughed it off, pretending it was just a deer. But nobody really believed that. We picked up the pace. A few minutes later, Marcus tripped over something half buried under the leaves, a boot. Old, torn, filled with rainwater. Inside it was a sock, still shaped like a foot. Lena screamed, and I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't fresh, but it hadn't been there long either. "Let's go back," I said. Marcus nodded, pale. But when we turned around, the path behind us wasn't there anymore. The forest had shifted somehow. I swear it. The trees looked closer, the slope steeper. That's when Ben started panicking. "We didn't walk this far downhill," he said. We didn't. The air grew cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. I took a few steps forward, and the ground beneath me moved. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't the earth shifting. It was breathing. The soil rose and fell, like something enormous was just beneath the surface. I shouted for everyone to run. We sprinted uphill, branches tearing at our clothes, the sound of movement following us. Massive, dragging, wet. The forest screamed with noise, snapping wood, crunching leaves, something enormous crawling fast. We burst through the trees into a clearing. For a moment, I thought we were safe, until I saw what was in the middle. A hollow, perfectly round, at least 20 feet wide. The soil inside was black, wet, pulsing faintly. Then I saw it move. Something pale rose up from the center, long arms, like roots twisting together, reaching toward the light. No face, no shape, just movement. Marcus froze, whispering, "What is that?" I grabbed his arm. "Don't look. Run." We ran until our legs burned, until the light from the setting sun finally broke through the canopy. That's when we saw the sign, faded, nailed to a tree, half rotten but still readable. "Do not step off the trail." By nightfall, we found the main path again. My compass finally worked. The air felt normal. We walked in silence until we reached the car. Nobody spoke on the way home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that wet sound, the dragging, the breath, the faint rhythm of the forest shifting. Around 3 a.m., I went to check my hiking bag, just to convince myself it was over. Inside, covered in dried mud, was a handful of black soil. And something else, a bootlace, torn clean in half. Marcus's. I tried calling him, no answer. I tried Ben, Lena, Kyle. None of them picked up. The next morning, I drove to Marcus's house. His car was still in the driveway, but the driver's side door was open. Mud all over the seat. When I stepped closer, I saw the prints leading away from it. Barefoot, deep, pointing toward the woods behind his house. I called the police. They searched all week but found nothing. No trail, no tracks, nothing. That was 2 months ago. Yesterday, I went hiking again, alone this time. I don't know why. Maybe to face it. Maybe to prove it wasn't real. The forest looked different now, older somehow. But halfway through, I noticed something strange on a nearby tree. A bootlace, tied around the trunk like a warning. And just below it, carved into the bark, "You stepped off the trail." I started hiking the Windmere Ridge Trail last fall, right before the season closed. It was supposed to be quiet that time of year, too cold for tourists, too early for snow. I just needed a weekend alone. There's a lookout at the top where you can see for miles, endless forests, Rivers that look like veins under the sun, the kind of beauty that makes you feel small in the best way. But the locals in the nearby town had warned me not to camp up there. One old man at the gas station said, "Don't stay after dark. The ridge has its own watcher." He said it like it was a weather report. I laughed, thanked him, and drove on. By late afternoon, I reached the ridge. The view was breathtaking. Layers of gold and rust-colored trees stretching into mist. The air was so still that even my breath felt too loud. I set up my tent just off the trail, near a half-buried wooden sign I could barely read. The only word visible was "keep." The rest had rotted away. As night fell, I started hearing it. A sound like someone walking along the gravel of the ridge, slow and heavy. The crunch of boots on dry earth. I thought maybe it was another hiker, until I realized the steps never grew closer or farther. Just one every few seconds, circling somewhere out in the fog. I called out once, just to be sure. No answer. Around midnight, the fog thickened into something solid. The air felt wet and electric, and my flashlight beam hit what looked like a person standing on the ridge. They didn't move, just stood there, facing the valley below. I called again. Nothing. When I blinked, they were gone. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those footsteps again. One slow crunch at a time, always stopping when I opened my tent flap. By morning, my tracks were gone. The entire area around the tent was smooth, like untouched sand. Only one set of prints remained, leading up to where I'd seen the figure. They stopped right at the edge. I told myself I'd leave that afternoon, but curiosity won. I followed those prints to the cliffside. That's when I noticed something carved into the rock, right beneath where the footprints ended. One watches, one returns. The wind picked up, howling between the trees, and for the first time, I realized there was another tent behind mine. Small, collapsed, covered in moss. Inside it, a journal. Most pages were ruined by rain, but one entry was still legible. He comes when the fog does. Don't look at him when he moves. If you do, you take his place. I dropped it and ran. Didn't even pack up my tent. I ran until my legs gave out near the base of the trail. When I finally looked back, I could barely see the ridge through the mist. But there was a shape standing where I had camped, watching. I don't hike anymore. I still love the mountains, but I can't be near fog without my skin crawling. Last week, I found something strange in my mailbox. It wasn't a letter, just a piece of paper, folded neatly in half. Inside, in shaky handwriting, it said, "You've been watched long enough." And taped to the bottom, a photo of the ridge. There was someone standing there, wearing my jacket